Happy feast day. You're probably thinking, what's he talking about? My feast day. Yes, it is. That is, if you hope to get to heaven. Because the only people who get to heaven are saints. And you say to yourself, yeah, maybe, but not me. I'm a sinner. So are we all. So were they. If you don't believe me, then believe Pope Francis, who said this: the solemnity of all saints is our celebration. Not because we are good, but because the sanctity of God has touched our lives. The saints are not perfect models, but people through whom God has passed. If we were to examine the entire roll call of all the saints, the things we would see is the great diversity of lifestyle. We would see young and old saints, brilliant and illiterate saints, saints who lived as hermits in isolation, and saints who spent their lives in the marketplace. Again, Pope Francis observes, we can compare them to church windows, which allow light to enter in different shades of color. The saints are our sisters and brothers who have welcomed the light of God in their heart and have passed it on to the world, each according to his or her own hue. But they are all transparent. They fought to remove the stains and the darkness of sin so as to enable the gentle light of God to pass through. It's important to hear the Pope acknowledge that saints fought to remove the stains and darkness of sin. I think all too often we look at saints and idealize them and their lives. Somehow we think they were superhuman and kind of floated through life with their feet not even touching the ground. But if we look deeper, we can see that maybe they weren't so much different from us. Look at St. Peter, chosen by Jesus as the rock upon whom he would build his church. And there he was after the Last Supper in the courtyard of the high priest, denying he even knew Jesus. Or St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest theological minds in the history of the church, within months of his death saying that all of his writings were merely straw. Or in our own time, St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, who seemed to be the paragon of composure and grace, but in her diaries confessing to be burdened with doubt for years. Saints, in spite of their circumstances, struggled to open themselves to God's love. And by that struggle, strove to do the best they could. Perhaps the best testimony to this are the words of St. Paul, who wrote to his disciple Timothy towards the end of his life. St. Paul himself had been one of the fiercest opponents of Christianity before his conversion. In reflecting on his life, we have to listen to what St. Paul says, and we have to listen to what St. Paul does not say. He said, I ran the race, I fought the fight, I kept the faith. He did not say I won the race. He didn't say I came in first, I was the best. He said, I did my best. And that's all God asks of each one of us, to do our best. You know, we're used to those athletic competitions like the Olympics, where after each event we see the 3 medal winners up on the platform getting their gold, silver, and bronze medals. Meanwhile, there were dozens, maybe hundreds of athletes who were almost as good. Well, God doesn't just reward the best. God rewards each one of us for doing our best. Each one of us with our own sets of relationships, our own unique responsibilities, which no one in human history ever had or ever will have. Each one of us is called to do the best we can within our lifetime. Each one of us is called to let the light of God shine through us with our unique hue. Now, there was a formal process which the church has for declaring a saint. It was an arduous process that could sometimes take centuries. It required authentication of miracles that resulted through the intercession of the saint-to-be. A promoter of the cause strove to prove the legitimacy of the claim to sainthood, while the devil's advocate made the case that this candidate was unworthy for one reason or another. The process has been somewhat streamlined in recent years, but it's still a very formal regimen, and it can still take decades. That's the formal process. But I think there's another way that saints are recognized. I had the opportunity about 40 years ago, while I was writing my dissertation on some medieval chant manuscripts, to come across a 12th century calendar in a manuscript from central Italy. I think it gives us another perspective on how saints can be recognized. The manuscript was from a monastery in Umbria, from the town of Norcia. A cursory look at the first few days of January can give us a sense of how localized was the canonization process. Here are some of the entries. January 1st, Saint Concordia, priest and martyr of Spoleto, which happens to be 26 miles southwest of Norcia. January 2nd, Saint Volusiano, bishop of Terni, 40 miles south of Norcia. And same day, Blessed Cecilia Copoli of Perugia, 60 miles north of Norcia. January 3rd, Blessed Guglielmo Coronato of Todi, 54 miles west of Norcia. You get the picture. All of these saints were from the neighborhood. They were all from within a 60-mile radius. Now, I'm sure if we went to another medieval monastery in another province of Italy, we would find the same phenomenon, except there would be different names from the area around that monastery. It demonstrates the kind of spontaneity that must have existed in the faithful recognizing holiness and the light of God's love shining through people they knew. We probably have experienced something like that in our own lives when someone would say, "Remember when that lady died in childbirth and your grandmother took those children into her home until the father could get his life together? Your grandmother was a saint." Or, "I'll never forget when we had those terrible storms and the farm near your uncle, that farmer lost everything. Your uncle really helped him to get back on his feet again. Your uncle was a saint." In today's gospel, Jesus outlines 9 ways through which we can become saints. Again, it's Pope Francis who says it so well. The ingredients for a happy life are called Beatitudes. Blessed are the simple, the humble who make room for God, who are able to weep for others and for their own mistakes, who remain meek, fight for justice, are merciful toward all, safeguard purity of heart, always work for peace and abide in joy, do not hate, and even when suffering, respond to evil with good. If only we could do some of that, then we too will be saints. Remember this, they're not saints because they are in heaven. They're in heaven because they were saints here on earth. And that's what we're all called to be. Happy Feast Day.